Welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining me on the Finding Elevation podcast. I'm excited for our chat today because I really love it when people have like these life pivots. Like we'll get into talking about how you've went from practicing law to being an entrepreneur and how you focus so much on giving back in recent years. And I just love hearing like how those journeys unfold for people because they're often very unexpected. But let's start with sort of Kilimanjaro and how you decided that was the peak you wanted to climb. What got you to that point?
Thank you for having me, Lisa. My Kilimanjaro story starts with a very good friend of mine named Bob. Bob and I are working on a gigantic service project together. We've been working together for about 4.5 years, and he is quite the outdoorsman and has had many great hikes under his belt. He and I have become very good friends over that period of time. While we don't live in the same city, he stays with me when he comes, and he's been talking to me about Kilimanjaro and said it was on his bucket list to do. I said, well, that sounds great. You ought to do it. I had no idea he was fishing around for me to go with him. And he finally just came out and said, I don't have anyone to go with. I said, well, why don't you do it by yourself? It seems like the kind of thing you could do alone. And he said, well, I want you to come with me, which I thought was an amazing invitation. And I was excited to get the time with him to do it together. This was a year and a couple of months before we actually went. Then a few months later, he said, well, I have a daughter who loves to hike, would love to do Kilimanjaro with us. Would be okay with you if she came? And I said, look, that's great with me. I think it's wonderful. I also have a daughter who is really into the outdoors. Do you mind if I ask her? And I asked my daughter after his daughter said yes. And she works out in San Francisco. Turned out her boss had hiked Kilimanjaro and met her husband on the trip. And so she was
oh my gosh,
very excited to encourage my daughter to take the time and to do it. And so we were all planned to go father-daughter to Kilimanjaro and hike Kilimanjaro together. And then about, 3 months before the trip, he had to back out because of a work commitment that overlapped with what he was doing that was not movable at all. And so there was no way I was going to uninvite my daughter to go hike Kilimanjaro, who was looking forward to it. And now as I sit here, I'm so glad that I didn't, but thought did cross my mind, like, what am I doing going to do this when it wasn't my idea in the first place? And so that's how I ended up going.
Did your friend's daughter still go? Or it was just you and your daughter?
Just me and my daughter.
And what an amazing experience for a father and daughter to have together.
It really was. I mean, the experience, of course, absolutely phenomenal. Just to be able to spend 15, 16 days together, hiking them out and on safari in an atmosphere where we were relatively cut off from the rest of the world and could just be with each other and other people experiencing it literally step by step. Many days I hiked right behind her and walked in her steps.
That's so cool.
Yeah, which was not lost on me.
So it wasn't your idea. It wasn't like this thing on your bucket list. But did you have any expectations going into it?
And I'm not a hiker. I mean, the biggest hike that I'd ever done was down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and back up, which was a nice hike up. Because we did it without stopping. It was great. My expectations were just from what I read in the book. I read a book about hiking Kilimanjaro, got pretty excited about it. I was relatively terrified about the altitude potential. I'm from New Orleans. We live below sea level. I don't spend a whole lot of time in environments where I'm above sea level much. The most I'd ever done was been to the Denver area and did some running on the jogger. And so that was the only thing I had to really compare it to. But, running 3 miles or 4 miles in 6,000, 7,000 foot elevation didn't seem like it was, preparing for it. And what I found in reading was that really breathing exercises were a better use of my energy in preparing for the altitude than getting in better shape. And that I run about 5 miles 4 days a week, and that was probably good enough shape to actually do the hike. But the breathing exercises would help. And so I started doing breathing exercises because I was so worried about the altitude in like May or June before a January hike. So I'd say 7 or 8 months ahead of time. And it wasn't much. I mean, the breathing exercise that I did could be done in less than 10 minutes every day.
We're a big fan of breath work. I've used it myself to prepare for climbs. So can you share what you did and the
Yes.
impact you think it
And
had?
what I do, I actually did it during my morning meditation, and I continue to do it every day during my morning meditation because I like it. It helps me get centered when I start my meditation. So it's a breathe in to the count of 4 as stopping, and then a breathe out to 6, back into 4, out to 8, back into 4, out to 10, back into 4, out to 12, back into 4, out to 14. That's one set.
Wow.
And then you repeat that one set 6 total times. And that's it. You just do 6 sets of that breathing. And it took me a little while to be able to do it comfortably. But, after about a month or a month and a half, I could do it comfortably. And sometimes would even do it more than 6 times. For example, if I did an extended meditation, which was going to be for an hour instead of 30 minutes, which is what I usually do, sometimes I would start off and do 10 or 12 sets, or I would meditate for a certain period of time, and then to gather me back into a completely disconnected space, I would breathe again. I find that if I focus on the counting and the breath, I really can't let much else into my mind at all at the time, and it helps.
And so we've explored different kinds of breath work, and I think, and I'm a big fan of it as well, both as you're describing, which is sort of to prepare you for something and build the capability, but also in tense moments to use breath work to calm yourself down. And it's that longer exhale that really starts to calm your nervous system down and get you to a place where you're feeling more centered. So I think that's great that you employed that in your preparation. How did you come up with that idea? Had you read something about it?
ChatGPT.
Our friend ChatGPT.
Definitely my friend. You get a lot of critique about ChatGPT, and I know it has limited application, but it is done right by me so far.
Yeah, no, I am. I'm a big fan of it. We can have a whole other conversation about AI, but I think that finding ways to incorporate it in a way into your life or your business that's useful and actually allows you to have more connection with humans is, for me, the right way to do it, or that gives you access to data you wouldn't otherwise have, I think is how I find it best to use AI. So you didn't really have a lot of expectations going in. You'd read some books. What was the day-to-day like for you on Kilimanjaro?
Well, looking at it in hindsight, I think that the process of hiking Kilimanjaro was very well thought out and planned by you all, so that you sort of paced yourself and foundationally worked your way up to the more challenging aspects of it, not just from an altitude perspective, but also from a physical exertion perspective. And I see that now, and I really appreciate that, particularly as someone who's not done significant hikes before. I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, not being too familiar with cold weather, we got super lucky, and then it hardly rained at all while we were on the trip.
Wow.
Had it been raining when it was less than, freezing temperature,
less than 50,
dark, and we were hiking, I might have a little different experience, but I will tell you that I thought it was fantastic. The guides, everybody that helped in the process was amazingly friendly. The gear list, the packing that you all gave us was so thorough that there wasn't anything that I needed or my daughter needed that we didn't have as a result of having the list and being there. And all of the instruction, the night before and the morning of every day, completely laid out what we were doing and where we were going. And intentionally, the guides didn't answer too many questions about things about the next day or the day after or anything like that. Kept us focused in the moment. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. I'm not a tent sleeper either. And so
how did that go?
Probably better for me than my daughter, right? I can't imagine.
Oh, really?
26 years old and having to sleep in a tent with your dad. She did not.
Maybe not her idea.
She did not complain. It was fun. Good. It was great. Of course, you almost feel, I did feel guilty, towards the end. All of the work that the Sherpas did for us in connection with the trip. It's really it's hard to use the word luxury when you're talking about something like hiking Kilimanjaro, but you felt that way, right? I mean, your tent's set up for you, it's pulled down for you, everything's carried for you, water and fire and the mess tent, the chairs. And, it is quite wonderful to only have to focus on just the work to do the hike and the people that you're with. It was a nice community that we had on the trip. There were 7 of us. And so There were great times just me and my daughter, but there were also wonderful times with the rest of the community, sharing experiences with the guides themselves.
I think Kilimanjaro is one of those mountains where you are so well supported, both in terms of the people on the trip who are there to help, but like really good food. It's one of the only places where I've heard people say they've gained weight while climbing a mountain.
I don't know how much salt gets put into the food and then to make you drink more water and retain water. But it took me almost a week and a half after I got back for my body to readjust to the salt level.
That sounds about right. You mentioned briefly community, and I mean, that is one of the reasons why it brings a lot of us back to the mountains, because you're having this really, apex experience with a shared community. And it's just that I think what you learn about yourself is so much richer. What you experience collectively is so much more important. Are there things that really stood out to you that you took away from that trip as a result of the people you were there with?
Yes, is the answer. And I'm trying to collect my thoughts about it. First, with respect to the guides, I feel like I learned a significant amount about the culture of that area of Africa and about the commitment of the people and the spiritual aspect
Mm-hmm.
the mountain serves in the community itself. From just
Mm-hmm.
having conversations with the guides, but also in watching how they treated other people and how they treated each other, right?
Yeah.
There was a tremendous amount of respect for the mountain itself and what the mountain brings to the community and what it has brought to the community
Mm-hmm.
for ages and ages and ages. I wouldn't even begin to know how many years we're talking about generationally. It is their culture. The mountain, in a large part, is their culture.
Yeah.
I was sort of blown away by that. I hadn't thought about that before I went. I think with respect to people that were on the trip, I enjoyed watching the relationships between two married couples that were on the trip. Candidly, as somebody who is divorced and then remarried, we were on the trip with two couples that have been married each for 25 plus or minus years. And
Yep.
it was really amazing for me to see them in action, interacting with each other in an environment where they were pushing each other, pushing themselves, a little aggravated, a little frustrated, being tested physically, being tested mentally, and how they treated each other. I feel like I learned a little bit more about some relationship skills
Yeah.
when watching other people do it. And then one of the gentlemen who was on the trip with us was there by himself. And this was a goal that he had, something that he's been wanting to do for quite a long time. It was a treat or a present to himself at a significant point in his life. I think the rest of the group, as well as the guides, rallied around him as a result of that.
Mm.
Made sure,
Mm-hmm.
since he was the only person who didn't have someone with him, that he was always being talked to or taken care of. He probably suffered the most with the altitude and, helping him with his pack or with water or everything worked in a communal aspect so that I don't feel like he would tell you he felt alone when he was on the trip. That's my observation. And that was really a good learning experience too, to see people come together like that around somebody in a community.
Yep, I agree. And like I said, that's a big part of why I keep going back to the mountains, is to continue to build that community. What about with your daughter? So you said, you're literally walking in her footsteps many days. What will stand out to you about that experience that you shared?
Well, so many different things. There wasn't one of those moments that you think where, father and daughter are sitting on the side of the mountain and looking at each other, talking about some great philosophical meaning moment in your lives strapped into to the mountain. I can't say that. But what I can say is experiencing each part of it together all the way through
Mm-hmm.
built a bond between the two of us that I
Mm-hmm.
think is unbreakable. And I felt leaving the trip that we are so much stronger as individuals bound together, that we have now
Yeah.
the shared common experience, that there's so much beauty and wonder to not just the mountain experience, but the safari, the people and the indigenous cultures on the safari, being able to share all of that in conversation and think
Yeah.
about some of the differences. We had the experience of having a family trip with the rest of her sisters to Japan a year or so before. And, the ability to talk about the differences in culture as compared to
Right.
American culture, I think it's a level of exploration philosophically with her about non-personal ideas, but things at which we do have personal opinions that is really beneficial. We literally took a piece of it with us. She loves the outdoors, as I've said, and I had carried around a pebble that she and I had gotten on a hike in California before. We
Uh,
left that one at the top of Kilimanjaro, and we picked this one up, or I let her pick it up.
wow.
It's a lot lighter because it's, I guess, volcanic rock. But I carry it with me in my pocket every day to remind me of the trip and to remind me of her. And she knows that. And I think that it's just a tangible reminder. My birthday was 2 Saturdays ago, and she gave me a picture of the two of us from the hike. And so it's just an unbelievable weaving together of a bond that was already strong, but it's now even stronger.
I think when I started climbing, I didn't fully appreciate how transformative it would be in that way or could be in that way. I think I thought, this is an athletic pursuit and I want to accomplish something. And eventually, learned that there's so much more to be gained personally and from a collective sense when we bond that way in the mountains. It's really a special experience that I'm sure you and your daughter will always remember and have that strengthens your relationship.
Absolutely. And one thing that comes to mind with respect to her is, it just worked out that she would be pretty talkative with one of the guides, and that guide ended up being in the front most days. And so I would go behind her and she would be talking to him. So she would go first and I would go second. It took me a while to sort of really appreciate the fact that I was walking in her footsteps as opposed
Yeah.
to the way around. And of course, she was the real reason I ended up going, ended up being on the trip. And that was a beautiful thing. I don't know whether it had partly to do with following her or not, but one of my lessons learned, my deep lessons learned from the trip, is the spirituality aspect of the monotony of the
Yes.
and being just solely focused on the next step. And all I would do in those days towards the end where it's getting a little bit harder and a little bit longer and a little bit tougher, right? All I would be doing is looking at the ground and where her foot was leaving and where my foot was going. And that was it, maybe about a 2 or 3 yard by yard and a half area. And I would do that for hours, to do it until we broke, do it till we broke, do it till we broke. I started to see a rhythm in just being hyper focused on the next step and not worrying about anything else because I didn't have the guys had everything taken care of. I had everything in my pack I needed. The only thing I needed to worry about is making it on the next couple steps. And it allowed my mind to really dive into myself spiritually. I found that some of the thoughts and ideas that harvested as a result of that focus were access to creativity and pieces that I don't know I would have gotten those ideas, those thoughts any other way. They came in those moments and some pretty significant things that I've taken with me and I've adapted into some of the work that I'm doing. And it's beautiful.
There's so many things, so many ways I could take that comment. How would that experience of being able to just be sort of deeply present is how I would describe it. How did that compare to your experience in meditation? Was it similar? Do you think one supported because you have a really solid meditation practice that allowed you to sort of get into that space on the mountain?
Maybe. It may have. I live a life outside of my morning daily routine, which some days takes 3 or 4 hours to complete. So it's a significant routine where I'm by myself and alone and working either meditation or exercise or playing the piano or yoga, doing something for myself. Once that's over with, I'm moving 1,000,000 miles a minute.
Yeah.
I've got my fingers in 8 different things at one time and my phone's going off and I have people here and there. And, being able to stay present and being able to stay focused is a real challenge for me. And of course, it's the value of the time that you can stay focused that really harvests a lot of what I end up then spend my time chasing. And so I see the need for both significantly. And I do think, that you mentioned it, being involved in meditation probably significantly helped me being able to get into that space. I also think being able to trust in the process, right?
Right.
I've been doing a fair amount of reading and just thought in general about trusting the process, not the result, and carrying heavy spiritual bent towards trusting in God and believing in
Mm-hmm.
God's will and not having to challenge whether something is good or bad and just accepting
Right.
what comes and adapting to whatever it may be. I think that helped too, to really stay hyper focused in that moment.
And I would say you probably got so much more out of it because you were able to stay focused and present and to adapt and accept the scenario that you were in, right? If you felt like oxygen deprived or you were cold or something wasn't quite right with your gear, to the extent that we can assess those things and determine what's truly a problem that needs to be addressed, from like, I'm just uncomfortable right now.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to sit in that place of discomfort, I think is really powerful, because it can take you to a point where you have the skill now to accept and surrender, and that can unlock so many more things for us, I think.
Yeah, very well said. I think that, like so many things that are physically exerting and also emotionally exerting, the battle is all in your mind, right?
Yeah.
And if we can use the tools and the strategies that we've developed to sort of put our minds at ease and rest, the mind, that allows the spirit to be accessed.
Is there one tool? I mean, we've sort of been talking about some tools, but is there one that is like a go-to for you, or do you just really focus on being present?
I mean, the most present I find myself is breathing during meditation. I think the
Mm-hmm.
second most is in playing the piano. I'm
Mm-hmm.
relatively new to the piano. I've been a drummer for many years, all amateur. I picked up the piano about 3 years ago, and I
Mm-hmm.
wish I'd been playing it since I was a kid, because
Aw.
there is a certain beauty in the lesson. It's the same thing with hiking Kilimanjaro, attempting something that seems impossible, breaking it down into really little bitty pieces. I mean, it might just
Yep.
be playing 1, 2, 3 notes, right? And that's
Right.
it. That's all you can get is the 3 notes. And then you start playing the fourth, fifth, and sixth. And you might be looking at a piece of music that's 4 pages long. And here you are
This.
fighting off. It might take 2 days to learn how to play just that
Mm-hmm.
one little part, right? In a week, you've got only just one system of the whole song down, right? And so I think playing the piano has helped me, because sometimes I have to go 100 times repeating one system before I can finally get it and then make the transition into the next one. It's a great experience for how to climb any mountain in your life, right? Just like
Yeah.
climbing Kilimanjaro is a great metaphor for how to climb any mountain in life.
I think we get so focused in our culture about the goal, right? And standing on the summit, which is analogous with so many things, that and I'm so guilty of this, which is why I appreciate our conversation today, because it's a good reminder to me. We lose track of the process of getting there. And so many times that's where the real growth is, or the real benefit or joy comes from the process and to me, in order to really take all that in, you have to be present. Otherwise you're just sort of checked out and checking the boxes and going a million miles a minute and missing out on so much.
Right. There's no doubt. But the beauty of Kilimanjaro definitely came in the minutes to the top. No doubt the summit, starting off in a glacier, crater.
Yeah. Because you slept at the crater, right?
Taking steps in the dark, literally making sure that my foot fit into Caroline's spot in the snow so that I knew that I wouldn't slip and fall down. As somebody who's not a mountain person or a hiker or experienced with snow, even though the incline is maybe 45 degrees or something like that, I'm walking on it thinking if I slip, I'm going to roll
It's
all
over.
all the way down the mountain, because that's my mindset as a novice. Plus, my feet aren't used to having to readjust to hiking in the snow. So I'm just participating as much as I
Mm-hmm.
can in following the leader. Semi terrifying as that could be in the moment, when the sun comes up when you're at the top right after that, and it's by far one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. That wasn't the real beauty of the trip. As gorgeous and beautiful as that was, the real beauty in the trip was the day-to-day work.
And you mentioned that there are things that you will take from this, or some creativity that you experience as a result of being present on the mountain, that you'll take to your work. So let's talk a little bit about that. Have made, I don't know, maybe not a lifetime, but you transitioned from law to doing entrepreneurial work and giving back to the community that you live in. I'm curious about that transition. How did that happen for you, and what sort of prompted it?
Well, as you said in the beginning, very little of that was conscious decision making.
Yeah.
Most of that was realizing it was going on, and then that things had changed, and I was just, better get with the program consciously. So I'm a CPA and an attorney who has been an entrepreneur since I graduated from school, and even in college, worked during the day, went to
Mm-hmm.
school at night and learned how to run businesses, etc. And so I have constantly been using sort of business applications, whether it's accounting or law or just operationally in many things that I was doing. I started to bring some of that work into the not for profit world in or around 2000, when I was called to get involved in church through a book that I read. And I had no idea it was going to happen, but I went to lunch with a friend of mine who had another friend of his at lunch, and it was just to get to know you. And this guy at lunch was a CPA, but he was also an evangelical minister. And he said, I have a copy of a book I wrote. Would you like it? Gave it to me. I went home and read it, and it changed my life. And it was about stewardship, and it was about, being given talents and sharing your talent. What are you going to do to share your talents with the world? To serve just yourself? It took a real practical approach to evaluating service, which I really liked as an accountant. It was take an inventory, go back and look at 6 months of your checkbook, and look sick when people still had checkbooks, 6 months of your checkbook and 6 months of your calendar, and that will tell you what's important to you.
Right.
Take an inventory. And as an accountant, that's how you do an audit. That's how you present financial statements. And I went back and looked, and I was just like, it didn't match how I thought about myself at all. And that was a real good wake up call. And so, not planning to do it, I just sort of, turned, how could I get involved? And church was the number one way to do it. And from there, Hurricane Katrina happened in New Orleans, which was a monster event in 2000.
Yep.
There was a semi call by a priest and some people that we needed to do something about affordable housing. And it was a conversation at a party after an event. People were trying to raise money for something a month or so into after Katrina, and somebody commented to me, and somebody said, well, we ought to do something about this. And before you knew it, the next day I was working on it. Literally, my mind just started spinning, and I was working. And a couple of months or so later, we got a $2.3 million grant to start an entity to do affordable housing to try to bring people back to
Wow.
New Orleans, get them back here. And I did that for many years, along with working in the church otherwise. And then, as a combination of a few different things that were going on in my life, I started getting focused on homelessness. And it was really subtle. I started looking at people begging at red lights and really thinking
Mm-hmm.
about them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
wonder what's behind them. I wonder what's going on.
Yeah.
I wonder
Right.
what they're thinking. I wonder how they got here, just
Mm-hmm.
curious. Then I started getting out of my car and talking to them. And then one winter, it was really cold. This all happened in a couple of months period. One winter, it was really cold, and my wife and I decided to take our car and go down and talk to people in some of the encampments about, did they want us to bring them to a hotel? What did they need? And I
Yeah.
was blown away that people didn't want to go to a hotel. They liked their tents. They liked the people that were there. They couldn't do what they wanted to do at a hotel. Their community was so important to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all these things that I thought about homelessness were not what it was like at all for the individuals there. And it really struck me. And then, just, I don't know, a month or so later, I'm sitting at a red light at a major intersection on my way back downtown to go to work from a church meeting. And I'm watching this guy beg. And I say to myself, somebody ought to do something about this. Meaning, there should be food for people all the time, no matter who they are and no matter where they are.
Yeah.
And God spoke to me. I heard the words inside of my head, that someone is you. So I finished my office, and I ran an ad for an executive director for a not-for-profit that didn't exist. And I was doing it, there wasn't any.
And at that point, it was related to homelessness and like housing. Okay.
So
or did you have some other
I was doing
idea?
the work in housing, and then I was called into homelessness. And so, when you're doing affordable housing, you're dealing with people who are average median income 40 to 80%, right? But you're dealing with people
Mm-hmm.
who generally have housing already and just want to buy a home, but they're really way under the average median income, right? And so you're trying to come up with creative ways to get them into a house that has some dignity and respect and honor. That's
Yeah.
a whole different world than dealing with people who are living on the street and the various
Absolutely.
reasons for why that happened. I didn't know it at the time. Like I said, it wasn't thought out. If I was going into the homeless business, I would study it, do research, evaluate it all. You're going to
Have a business plan.
This just started with a calling, and I went to the office, ran an ad, hired somebody. We didn't know what we were doing. Within 6 weeks, we were passing out water in the encampments. It was summertime. It was hot. I'm like, let's just go to Walmart, fill up a trunk with water, and go out there and start passing out water. We just started doing that every day. 2 or 3 weeks later, we were feeding every day. And come June 1st, we'll be feed. This will be 12 years we've been doing it. And so we fed over a half a
Wow.
million meals, over 1 million bottles of water. We sent people home. We sent over 4,000 people home and reunited them with loved ones. And then it was it kept getting more and more and more. So COVID happened. And I guess there's sort of a theme here and disaster and need. COVID happened.
Mm-hmm.
All the other homeless organizations were closed. We were the only people feeding every day. And so we were feeding
Wow.
breakfast, lunch, and dinner instead of just breakfast. In addition to that, through this carnival organization that I'm affiliated with and some friends that I have in the music business, we have these Mardi Gras floats. And one of them they're all based around music. And one of them has a live stage on it. We do some charity work with it. And one of my friends suggested that we do live streams to raise money for musicians and gig workers. And so by April the 3rd, 2020, we had our first show. It was 2 weeks or 3 weeks into the shutdown. And we
That's
did a
amazing.
virtual stream worldwide to give away free music every week. And we raised $1 million and gave away 942 grants in a year. And so before you knew it, I was feeding 3 meals a day and producing a weekly TV show. And this all happened within a period of a couple of weeks, right? And again, there was no
Wow.
prior planning into doing any of it. Before I knew it, I was spending 80 to 90% of my time doing charity work and service work.
Right.
And I have not stopped since. And I've just readjusted my life to accommodate the path that's been furnished to me. And I feel amazingly blessed to have been called and to be given these opportunities, which has turned into a lot more than even that. I'm working on building a museum to tell the story of Louisiana music from Congo Square until today. 120,000 square feet, worldwide institution, similar to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Country Music Hall of Fame. As a matter of fact, Bob Santelli curated and under the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He is the friend of mine who canceled on me on the trip that wanted
I've spoken to Bob. That's awesome.
Yes. That whole charity journey is how I ended up on Kilimanjaro in the first place, because without doing that work, I never meet Bob, and Bob and I don't become friends. And then he makes the suggestion, and there I am.
I love it when you can look back and connect the dots like that. And I'm curious, I mean, your life, it feels like, has changed a lot since you started to focus so much on giving back. What was Chris like before, and what is Chris like now? How would you compare how you've changed as a result of that work?
It's so hard to compare the Chris from before to the Chris from now. First of all, I'm in recovery now. I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic, and I had a long struggle with that for many years.
Well, congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. And this journey has allowed me to come to terms with that and to make life changes, to really throw myself into healing and focusing on my traumas and being able to come to terms with some childhood related things that needed to be addressed that I've tried to chase away for a time. It's brought a real sense of purpose and honor to me, respect for my fellow humans, and I think empathy. Understanding more. It's the getting out of the car and talking to people and listening to them and trying to really see where they are and where they're coming from. I wasn't able to do that before. I only saw people for who I wanted them to be or who I thought they were. One of the two, but not seeing and listening to them tell me who they were and accepting them, rather than trying to put them into a hole or a peg or make them into what I needed to be.
Well, a couple questions. What is next? I'm looking at your website, and there's so many community projects that you have that have had significant impact. Are there things on the horizon for you that you would like to add to what you've already done in terms of nonprofit?
Well, I mean, I feel like I'll answer whatever call God sends, and even when it doesn't seem like it's a good idea. About a year and a half ago, I was called in connection with church to do something. And I went home, and first thing my wife said was, no. She's like, you don't have any time to do it. I'm like, I don't think I have a choice, but I'll think about it for a couple of days. But, whatever I'm called to do, I think that this project that I'm working on with the Louisiana Music and Heritage Experience is so profound. My motivation for being involved in it, my calling, is to try to answer a socioeconomic problem that exists in our community. In our community, we have Louisiana, particularly New Orleans, has one of the strongest roots of music in anywhere in the world. most every American genre of music can tie a significant root to the city of New Orleans.
Wow.
A multicultural aspect, slavery, Native Americans, French, Spanish, the Afro Latin beats, all of
Mm-hmm.
that came here and merged and melded. And you can trace every major genre here one way or the other. And that's a story that isn't told and it needs to be told. But one of the real negative parts of what's happened is that we have, as a society, lean on that heritage and we don't honor
Mm-hmm.
and respect it. We think that just
Mm.
by being a fan of it, that we're honoring and respecting it. And that's not enough. And I realized this when we were doing the Funky Uncle work, and I'd be going to a musician's house and bringing $400 in cash and talking to his girlfriend who's crying because I'm giving them enough money to pay their car insurance, you know? And I realized that I had known the suffering that artists have to pursue their passion for some time. But the real working, gigging musicians and people who work in that environment, there's just a gigantic divide between
Yeah.
how much we say we appreciate them and how much we act like we appreciate. And so my
Mm-hmm.
job is to narrow that divide. And so the whole purpose of building the institution is to monetize the history so that we can take the money and then pay the musicians and the gig workers and give them opportunities where we pay them with respect and honor so that they'll be inspired to create at a different level.
Right.
And that will all build as an example out into the community by booking events and booking music, increasing the pay scale so that the whole socioeconomic environment has changed. So it'll take 3 years from now to get it open. And then it might take 20 years after that to make the impact that I'd really like to see long term. I'm called to try to do that. And so, it's hard to think of doing much else, although I am doing a few other things. It's hard to think of doing much else because that's quite an undertaking.
I can imagine. Yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing it one day when it's open.
Thank you.
Curious, as we sort of wrap things up, what are you the most proud of in your life?
My girls. I have 4 daughters.
Ah.
Caroline, the one I hiked Kilimanjaro with, Claiborne, who is my oldest, Claire, and Mary Catherine. And they are just so well developed, adjusted, loving, kind, well educated, well intended people. I'm very proud of their ability to rise up and become wonderful humans.
Yep. And I'm sure they would say the same about you as their
I hope
father.
so.
Well, it has been so fun, Chris, getting to know you a little bit better. A pleasure having you on Kilimanjaro with us, and just looking forward to where you go next and getting that museum open. It'll be fun to visit it one day.
Thank you, Lisa. It's been a pleasure.